need to is you need over time to be able to improve that, and that basically that is really the game over here. So just I've included this particular slide just in case that you don't have a website, let's say, yet. And do you need a website? Well, maybe, but even if you don't and you are transitioning, say, you can actually start by just having, for example, a Facebook page. I'm actually talking to a couple of people at the moment that they're trying to move. They have absolutely almost no web presence, and rather than investing in creating a lot of website now, what they're testing out is just having a couple of Facebook pages, trying different messaging to see how that works. And especially if you're starting or if your business is very small, that actually might work out quite well initially. It does force you to really understand the platform, let's say Facebook, quite well, and also pay attention to a lot of the really what people are saying, how they're communicating, which is always very useful. And one particular thing that I can give as a general advice, there isn't any right, once you start, let's say, building or modifying your website, I don't think there is a formula for what is the perfect website, but one particular thing that I've seen, that mistake that is done over and over again, is overinvestment and overthinking things. Like a website is not really an asset. It's more, you need to look at it more as a consumable. It is something that allows people to find you at a specific place in time, and then they need to take a certain action there. If it is buying some products, or maybe a lead form, reading some information about your business. So it provides a function. So try and resist the temptation to overinvest and overthink it in terms of spend a massive amount on the design. Yeah, all those things, I'm not saying they're important, like the same as branding. It's all, they can be very important. The messaging can be very important. But in reality, for most businesses, as long as the message is decent and it's not, then it will be okay. It might not be the perfect, but it is going to work. So if I can mention two things, the only thing that I would really invest a little bit in is just to make sure that whatever you do is you use, for example, a platform which is inexpensive, it's open source, so you can easily add to it or migrate, not something which is customized and you're locking yourself into a specific developer. But one particular thing is that universal thing is whatever you do just needs to be fast. That, because at the moment that is really an essential, because the faster it is, if people like you, they'll consume more of the website. If they don't like you, they're quickly going to go off it, and they'll determine quickly. So if it's fast, and if you got products, at least make sure that you got good quality photographs, because that's the main way that people actually feel in terms of what you're offering. The rest of it, if you're using standard technologies, and as long as there's no major roadblocks in terms of people can do a simple checkout to buy, or a simple form submission to get your lead, that would work. And the rest of it, if you want to improve it later on, you can do it. So on that aspect is what I've seen. A lot of people, they go that they think, okay, I need to do everything, automate everything, get something really sophisticated, get a really expensive platform that can save my business, like allows you to scale from 1 client to 1 million. Most of the time, that's a total waste of time and money, because you do need to get to where you are at. So if a simple website will do, that's great. And once your sophistication in terms of using online improves, you can then later on get a website in a year's time, or 6 months time, or 2 years. You can probably find that when you get a new website, a new platform, you can get it a lot cheaper than if you're trying to build everything up front. And most of the time when you try to build, let's say someone convinces you, well, I've got a very customized experience, or you want to make sure that your website can does personalization on real time based on segmentation of the audience. All those are great, but if you're at the moment you're not even using properly your email marketing, I can guarantee that you're not going to use those facilities, and they're not going to add any value to you. So that base is almost, yeah, use the minimum you can get away with in terms of the site. It will be good enough for you to test if it's working or not. And later on, as you you grow your level of sophistication, then you can, then I would recommend start building a feature. So I wouldn't overthink it and overthink all the design issue or the website. Just get it done. So when it comes then to actual marketing, like you either have a lot of the things, because I'm going to discuss later the different channels. You can either invest time or money. If you have both, that's great. So sometimes if you don't have money, you can just, it's about your time and about creating different things. And one of the things, especially if you don't have a lot of money to spend on advertising, you might find that, especially if you're trying to use social media, you might need to get yourself a little bit out there, which for some people is uncomfortable. A lot of people like to be in the background. So sometimes it's easier to push your personality than the business, depending on the business. So you might need to be out there. For some people, they like it, and some people not. So that's one of the things that if you do go that route, you might need to find that you need to sell yourself more than what you're comfortable with. But maybe there's someone in your company that is happy to do that, and maybe they can be the face of it. It's not always necessary, but it's something that you need to, sometimes you might need to leverage. So what tools we've got available? So now what I'm going to go over is a couple of the, just of the main sort of building blocks to how you actually can drive traffic and engagement, and basically how you would use them. So again, if you got any specific question of them, please make sure you just put them on, and I'm happy to discuss them in the next couple of minutes, or if not, basically offline afterwards. So I'm going to start with Facebook, social media like Facebook, Instagram, just because it's one of the, it's a massive platform, a huge user base in South Africa. And if you use that, one of the things that you need to think about, like any platform, is why are people there? What are they doing there? So are they basically, most of the time, are they busy consuming, are they interacting with friends' posts, with, are they busy consuming news or fake news or whatever they might be doing on the platform? Because you need to have an image of what it is that they're doing. So when you message, you interrupts their flow, is it something that they can relate to? Is it something that might be able to, that appealing? And in Facebook, you can do two different things. One of them is about building something, a little bit of a following by inserting yourself into people's conversation, like a little bit like an interruption, and by something that is a relevant message, which normally is not really a sales message, but something around what people are doing that is interest. And for that, one of the interesting things, you can do it obviously organically with posting or with your own network, but you probably would find that you need to spend a little bit of money because nowadays it's very difficult to actually show up organically over there. But the nice thing about a platform like Facebook is that you can create really, really targeted audiences. You can target people in your, if it's just a local business in a specific town or area, you can target those, you can target a specific interest. So you can actually, at the end of the day, it's much more efficient than almost any other medium of just of broadcasting medium. And you can literally, you can spend as little as you want and on that, and get exposure. So those targeting capabilities that if you need to learn, and if you're not familiar with them, you can quite easily read up about them. There's lots of courses, there's lots of training available from Facebook and also Google online, how to use them. They do require some investment of time, but if you don't have the time for someone else to do it or whatever, it's something that actually anyone can manage, and they're making them every day, they're making them easier and easier to use. But besides also about inserting yourself into the conversation, there's also one thing that was amazed me over the last couple of years is how much people are willing to actually interrupt what they're doing on Facebook and actually, let's say with a message, if it is a specific product offer or service offering, interrupt it, go there and actually interact with your site and buy something. A couple of years ago, that wasn't the case. Nowadays, it is pretty much the norm. So, and sometimes you can get, again, you can get fairly good targeting from that. And if this is about a specific offer that you're doing, people actually do act on it and do go out and do buy things. So if you still got a perception that people on Facebook don't buy, that's no longer true. They do. It's not something. It's not as high rate as they do from search, but it is something that's doable. So again, so here you got two modes of operation. One of them is maybe with those targeted messages. If you got a very compelling offer to that you can target very specifically to a certain group of people. And the other one is just a little bit more about stories, a little bit of background, something about that builds a little bit more engagement with your brand and whatever you're trying to do. So a lot of different objectives that you can play around with. The other one, which is quite a big one, is search engine optimization. I'm sure everyone has heard of it. Is a huge amount of information and misinformation about it. It's really, the reason why it's quite important is for most businesses is because you're asking a question. So they're on Google or Bing or whatever, whichever other search engine they're using. They're asking a question, they're looking for a specific answer. So as in contrast, let's say, for example, from Facebook, where they're just busy browsing and not necessarily directed, over here, they're really directed. They're saying, I want to buy X, or I'm looking for this service. So you're getting people at a point that we're actually looking for what you have to offer. So generally what happens is that those are the best possible leads that you can get, because you don't need to do a lot of work convincing, because the people already raising their hand and saying, here I am, I'm interested. So everyone wants to be there. So there's a massive amount of competition. And it's definitely an investment that you need to do. And nowadays the algorithms have become quite good. So a lot of it is really, you don't need to be too technical. I mean, although you just need to remove some maybe technical obstacle, but if you're using a standard platform, WordPress or all of them standard platforms, they generally tend to be pretty good already at exposing the right information to the search engine. So it's really about what content it is that you have. And that's, if you have the time, then it's really about writing blogs, about writing good descriptions for your product and services. And in South Africa, there's still room for it, because a lot of the times, if you're looking for very specific things, you find out that a lot of time overseas results get preferences. But so if you have a choice of to be able to, or the time to spend writing and including really good information that can specialize it to the South Africa or to the city or whatever, you do stand a better chance of showing. But it is a bit like I show in the image over here, it is a little bit of a waiting game. You can get lucky every now and again, but it's definitely a strategy that you need to do, because overall, after time, after 6 months, 1 year, it is definitely a strategy that pays off and gives you, for some businesses, that's what provides the profitability of the online campaigns. But it's not something that you can generally see immediate returns. So it's something that you do it for long term. It helps you also with the paid part, which we'll go over now, but it's something that it needs to be like an ongoing investment, but it will take some time. And yeah, if you're lucky and there's not a lot of competition in your area, you might start featuring a little bit earlier. And it's ideal for something that you can, if you don't have a lot of money, then, and you can write, or got someone who can actually do some good relevant content, then it's something that you can definitely invest in, but it's not something for immediate. Then you got the search engine marketing, which is the paid part. You can see that what at the top, the results that appear at the top. Nowadays, a lot of time, it's pretty much what most people just see when they open up a search engine result page. What they see is the paid part, because the organic part is way down at the bottom. It is by far the biggest amount of money in South Africa that goes into advertising online goes to search. It's like a dwarf everything else. Why? Because of what I mentioned earlier, because you are getting people when they are looking for car insurance or looking for a specific product, it's ability to show the message right there. And yeah, people don't want to wait until just they seen in organic, but also a lot of the time nowadays the organic message is not seen because it's further down. Some people search for it, but and they will go down because they prefer the organic over the paid the results. But it's definitely, if you think that people don't click on it, don't fool yourself, because if people didn't click on it, Google wouldn't making those absurd profits that they're making, those huge amount of money that they're making. It's really because people are actually interacting with this, and it does work. And what I wanted to illustrate in the graphics over here as well, that the nice thing as well about it, about paid search in particular, is because it's a great tool for scaling your business, because you can run it, you are in control of how much you spend. So you can spend 10 rand a day, 20 rand a day, or you can spend 1,000,000 rand a day. Maybe not for every single thing, but depend on the available markets. So you can either run it like a garden hose or like a fire hydrant in terms of the volume that you're getting out of it. So once you start up and you run it as a garden hose, as your business works, or you've seen that thing work, then you can start pushing it more and more. But one of the things is that it is pretty well established now that it works quite well. So I say, it is a really known secret already. So it's nothing new. So it is really, really competitive. So what I recommend is that you use it to get a little bit of traffic, just to see, for example, if you're trying to test a business proposition or specific marketing message, it's great to be able to immediately put the message out there, get a response. You can see if it's working for you, if it's not working for you, and you modify your strategy accordingly. So for that aspect, then it's great because it allows this is a message that you are a really select audience. People, for example, you put, I'm looking for, if it is in terms of, let's say, a car insurance, they're looking for car insurance, you put in a message there, you can see if that message works or doesn't work. You can test 2 or 3 messages, and it gives you a really great feedback in a really relatively short period of time. But because it's such a known thing, it actually tends to be quite expensive if you do not have great business processes behind it. What I mean is that a lot of other people are doing it, and if someone can extract more value out of those terms, or they are more efficient in exploiting the leads, let's say that you're trying to get leads out of it, and you run the campaign, you're getting a cost per lead is maybe 200 rand, and you take a whole 3 days before you get back to the people who came to you, you're probably going to find that you close very few of those things, so it tends to be quite expensive. So after a while, because if people act rationally, sometimes they don't, but most of the time there is if it's a mature industry, they act quite rationally. You find out that you'll find out what is the price per lead, but afterwards for you, it's more important is the price per close or for sale. That really would depend on how efficient your process is. So if you run if your efficiency is not high, you probably would find that it is on the expensive side. But even if it is that the case, you can still use it initially to just test your messaging with a couple of 100 rand, whatever. You might be able to find, now this messaging worked, this doesn't, can save you a lot of time as well in what you're going to, in terms of what content to try and push on Facebook, for example, in terms of the messaging, or in your organic writing. So it's a great tool, but also it's very, very competitive. Shopping, which is part of the Google, and also nowadays also in Facebook, it's really moving, increasingly becoming important. Like overseas markets like the UK, that's one of the bulk of spend is actually on that. In South Africa, it's moving there quite quickly. That's when you see, for example, you search on Google and you get those images at the top, which links you directly to the stores. What you need to remember about that, it's great, it's visual, the response rate is great, but it is very much of a comparison shopping over there. That it's very, very transparent, and it is very difficult to, if you don't have an established brand, to distinguish yourself. The only way really, it's a pure price comparison tool. So if you are price competitive, then that's great. That might be if you know you got a product and you can take some images of it, and a lot of the time to just use it is actually quite straightforward. Most of the time, if you got an e-commerce platform, one of the outputs out of it is what they call a product feed, which contain all the images and the description. And what you can, and if you got competitive pricing, or if you can spend a little bit of time improving the description, the head, of the products in there, can really be a great way of exposing your product and becoming quite cost effective. So again, if you are not price competitive for your thing, that's probably not a good avenue, because but a lot of time what some smaller businesses do is maybe they have a smaller set of the items which they know they're quite competitive on, they just have them there. Other stuff they don't publish, because then effectively you're showing every time prospective people that you're expensive for those products. So it actually might be negative more than positive. Remarketing. This is a really important element. It's also really inexpensive. Remarketing, that's the way that what it is every single time when you go onto a website and you put some remarketing tracking in there, that the messaging can follow you everywhere you are. If you are on browsing on websites, news websites, or if you're on Facebook or any other website, if it can basically target you with messaging, because it knows you've been to your site, you showed some interest. It's a way of segmenting a specific audience, and that works remarkably well to push a message, a specific branding message, but also a specific sales message. And one element that works really, really well in there, it's what's called dynamic remarketing, which is again based on feeds, the same as shopping. That if you, for example, been to a specific product page, that product then follows you. I'm sure you have all that experience when you're going around the web and you got those products following you. And the reason you see so much of it, because it actually works quite well. And the reason it works well, because a lot of time you have expressed interest in that particular product. For some reason, you didn't complete the transaction. Maybe, and sometimes it is because you don't like it or the price is is high, but sometimes because you're just still thinking about it, you're not quite sure, you didn't have quite time, you're doing other things. And so compared to any other type of interaction, the fact that it continuously reminds you for a specific period of time, it's actually quite helpful. And you find that the returns of the cost of a sale that you generate out of that, especially dynamic, tend to be very, very competitive. So it's really, really an essential tool. But again, yeah, it is something to complete the sale, or sometimes rather than a tool which to use to make a secondary sale. You can use it to make a secondary sale, but on that aspect, it tends to be a little bit expensive. What I mean by that, that it is useful if you're trying to generate the first sale or the first lead out of a client. But if you're selling some product which are not, that you expect people to buy on a repeated basis, once a month, once every 2 months, what you spend in getting the client to the first time, you cannot, most of the time won't cover the profit that you make out of the first transaction. So most of the time, especially in e-commerce, it's almost very, really difficult to actually get the cost of it, of the profit from that first sale, to cover the cost of a client acquisition. And what you're working at, you know what, maybe over a 3 months period, I'm going to break even, over 6 months. And the way that you get to them is through other means that you don't cost you as much, maybe through email marketing. Or if you're a very small business, you can even call people, or if you got an app, it's through push notification. But you can't afford one particular thing to watch out if you're doing a remarketing strategy, is if you're continuously going to be paying top run for every single time a person has to buy from you, it's not going to become very viable long term. You can definitely use it, but you need to really distinguish if you are getting a client for the first time, or if it's something that you're trying to sell an additional product. Because if you find yourself doing the latter, then you need to have a look in terms of why if your model is that people need to buy repeatedly from you, try and fix that first in terms of what's wrong with my communication strategy? Why haven't my emails been working? Other people didn't like the product, they didn't like my service. So fix that before just relying on remarketing, because that will end up long-term, will end up being quite expensive. YouTube. Sometimes there is actually a lot of time for YouTube. It's not really a return on investment channel, but actually we've seen it work sometimes quite well. And what it is, if you're looking at someone watching a video, it's probably one of the best engagements you can get. And in the picture illustrated, you actually getting really people are paying a lot of attention to, whether it's on mobile or on a computer, to when you're watching a video, you are immersed and you are looking much more than just browsing through a website. So if you got a really compelling story that you want to share, YouTube, and at the end of it, you think that if people watch it, they might want to contact you, or what you can create based on people watching your videos, you can create remarketing lists. It's a feature available on most of the platforms that you can generate those remarketing lists, and then you can message those people who watch your YouTube. You can message with a more direct message aimed at selling. It's a real great medium to get that engagement for a story. And sometimes even and also in another way of filtering who is really interested in your message. If you got also a really complicated product or complicated service that you need to explain, if you have that YouTube and people actually watch it, and you target who you're showing to a select enough audience, targeting just the people who ended up watching it might mean that now you're targeting people who are really interested in your product. So you might find that actually it works quite well. We actually got a case study in one of those things, which is quite amazing in terms of the sales we managed to achieve, but just people doing product reviews, fairly long ones, and by just the sales stuff. And those were quite engaging. They obviously seemed to appeal to the people in terms of they wanted to have that understanding of this was in terms of cell phones, how they work, how the little details about how you hold them, how they feel in your hand, and those are the type of things that resonated with client. And actually at the end, we actually managed to get quite a lot of sales. So although generally by itself, it's not really a selling medium, you can actually turn it into a selling medium depending on what it is. Not for everything, but it is definitely a tool, and sometimes it might be a really one of your only options, especially if you need to create a really compelling story before people are going to engage. And another great platform is LinkedIn, and it is quite inexpensive by itself because they price it mainly based on a lot of it is what people are willing to pay, a lot of it in terms of for hiring, which is quite expensive. But where it is really useful, especially if you got a B2B business and you're trying to target people based on their work function, rather than the interest. Because if you're trying, let's say, to someone who's, I don't know, an accountant or a marketing manager, or whatever, you probably cannot target them on Facebook because your interest, in Facebook or social media, what you are broadcasting is your interest as a person. But it really doesn't correlate to this particular role that you've got in terms of that, why you're trying to get to that person. But in LinkedIn, where the reason that people are there are generally for business reasons, to further their career, to read about some interesting information, which is really work-related. So they tend to fill in the profiles quite well in terms of the companies, in terms of the interest. So it's a great tool. It's a great way to reach people from a business perspective. And so you can either use the ads, or if you're good at creating content, you can definitely use it as a way to create content and try and become a thought leader, because it is a medium that people actually do spend time trying to improve themselves in terms of from the business in the business area. So that's, if you have the time rather than the money for advertising, that's a real great tool to use over there. The last one that I'm going to mention is Twitter. By itself, generally, it's much, much smaller as a platform compared to all the other platforms. And as a return on investment, it generally doesn't quite work. If you want to use it, it can be the interesting use case of that, if you happen to be good at it or it's relevant for you, is a little bit of a force multiplier. What I mean by that is that if you look at the people using it, it's a fairly small section of the population. And generally, those are early adopters, or the people who want to be like influencers, people who like to be at the latest, to share information on the last minute. So if you believe that what you've got is something that you can offer some interesting insight to that particular audience, you can use it as a way to try and gauge their interest and then try and have all those people effectively then multiply your message. But again, in terms of tracking it is a little bit, it's a bit difficult, but it's definitely a strategy, especially if your business has got that angle that you might produce some really interesting information that other people might find useful. And since they want to show that they're continuously on top of the latest trends, they might pick on that stuff and might share it. So it has that potential. And above all, what you need to do is, with all a common thing, is about measuring what you do. Because that's another thing, because the digital allows you to measure it, and in some aspect, if you don't measure, you're going to lose a lot of the value. Because if you're not measuring what you're doing on your website, or where the traffic, which campaign generated the returns, then you're just blindly going to be spending money. And a lot of people delay that to the last thing that they do. But if you do that, then it actually nowadays, it's really easy to do some basic measurement that gives you some insight. And whether it is on analytics or maybe the e-commerce platform that you're using or the Facebook analytics, it's about becoming familiar with those and using it, because you don't want to just blindly spend money and without ability to measure. Because really, if you can have that feedback mechanism, really allows you to, within a couple of weeks or a month, really double the efficiency of whatever you run. So I would spend a little bit of time trying to understand it, trying to make sure that you understand what it is, read a little bit about it. Those are fairly easy to use platforms. Sometimes they're not that intuitive, but most of the stuff is actually fairly self-explanatory. So I would spend the time on that. And yeah, and that is basically, I know it's a little bit of a whirlwind tour, but yeah. But thank you very much, and I'm very open for questions. And also, as part of the ORT Jet, I am a mentor over there. So if people want to ask questions individually, I'm very curious. I always love to hear about different businesses, and I don't mind helping or chatting to people and giving them my 2 cents worth on the situation, and basically, so I'm very open to that. So yeah, yeah, thank you.
Ariel, thank you. There are a few questions in the chat box, so people can add some more. I'll just start at the beginning. Do you use any specific tools to measure website speed?
For website speed, there's a lot of, first of all, Google Analytics provides you a measure as well. There are also lots of online tools that allow you to do that. There's literally, you search and it doesn't. So normally I rely is what's on Google Analytics, that's the one. And then the lots of websites that you can put your website in there, and they give you an analysis. I mean, there's literally hundreds out there. So there's no, I don't use any specific one, but yeah, there's a whole lot of them.
Okay.
Yeah, something new.
How do you know if your SEO presence is good or not?
Your SEO one, the
SEO, sorry.
The SEO presence. Look, the crux of it is at the end is if you are seeing, if you got, for example, there are 2 things. If you got a website Then you need to have what they call it used to be called the webmaster tools. Now it's basically, I forgot the name of it now. It's they changed the name. It's a Google product that basically allows you to see how your website is ranking. So that's the first thing. You need to have that, and basically once you have that, you can actually see how it's working, and that will give you the ranking. But the real crux of it is if you got Google Analytics as well, it will tell you how much traffic you're getting from natural search. And especially what I would look for over there is the traffic. It got a segment over there in analytics for the traffic that you're getting from natural search and for natural search, which did not directly lead to your homepage. Why? Because a lot of the time, maybe people are looking for your brand, and then therefore they will see your brand, your website appear, and they will click on it. That's great. So it means at least your brand is showing. But most of the time, what you want to appear is under more generic term when people are looking for the product. And if you are not getting a lot of traffic from them, then you've got a problem. I mean, it's other, so especially if you can see, for example, that Google, when you run some tools, if you're running a bit of paid search, for example, you can easily see that there's a massive amount of searches on some terms. And if you are not receiving any traffic on that, then you know that your SEO presence is basically not there. And there's also there's lots of tools out there that can give you, I mean, if you want to pay for tools, or sometimes there's a lot of free tools that will give you a snapshot of it if you're using things like SEO Moz or Majestic SEO that you can type in, and then they can give you a little bit of a snapshot of how you're doing. And there's a lot of tools available out there, and some of them offer you like a 30-day trial period, and you can load those, and they will give you a bit of a sense for what your competitors are doing. Most of them, and the coverage in South Africa is so-so, but you can get a little bit of a feel for that. But the main crux of it is if you're not getting the traffic, then it's not working for you. So the question is then you need to figure out is why. Yeah.
Okay. How do you go about SEM? What are the simple steps?
Okay, so the search engine marketing, sometimes people can say that search engine marketing is also the paid and organic. The way that I refer to in a lot of industries, there's no standard, but it's the paid part. Is really, you can open an account. Anyone can open an account in Google. It's really the only thing that you do is you log in there. It's free. Well, to open an account, you just need to put your credit card details in case you need to pay, and then you can start a campaign from there. There's a lot of the ways to start a campaign almost automatically, but I would recommend, if you want to do that, just read. There's a ton of material available online, available by Google as well, in terms of and videos and on how to use it. So I would first spend a little bit of time just reading, getting a little bit of a sense of what to do. The platform is quite intuitive. And the main thing that I would start is I would say to you that first of all, learn the control, so you don't have to fear it, and figure out first how do you control the spend level. So make sure that if you run a campaign, I would do it as a common, just to make sure that you don't have a fear factor in there. So if you set up the account initially, set it to one that you load the money, that it's not automatically taken off. In Facebook, unfortunately, it's always automatic, which is a bit of a problem. But in Google, for example, in SEM, the advantage, you can say that you can load how much money it can. So don't set it on the automatic, set it on the one that so worst comes to what you say, I'm only going to load 100 Rand. So never mind what even big mistake you might make, at worst you're going to spend 100 Rand. So I found that a lot of the time you do that, then at least you don't have the fear that, oh wow, I'm going to wake tomorrow morning and my car has been charged for 100,000. So in Google, that's a great thing about that. Make sure you use the manual settings. It's a bit of a pain once you run your campaign on an ongoing basis, because it continuously, if you forget to do it, campaign will stop. But I find that it's actually a really great to remove that anxiety about what happens if I make a big mistake. So you know what, I'd rather make the mistake of having to spend 2-3 minutes loading more money than the thing running amok and basically spending a year's budget in a day. So once you do that, then learn as well in terms of the things about how do you pace it, in terms of just understand the fact that you can control the daily budget. So, and then about, especially if you've got a geography, about making sure that your geographical targeting is correct, that you're targeting South Africa. Most of the time, if you create a campaign within South Africa and you say that you're targeting South Africa, automatically it will set it as South Africa. But if, for example, you're targeting, once you created that, and let's say your business is more local, let's say you're just targeting Cape Town, just make sure that you are targeting Cape Town. And then that's the main thing. So at least you know what, you don't target people in Johannesburg if you're not servicing Johannesburg. So those are the basics. And then, okay, then it's about finding keywords. Those are a little bit in terms of tech. There are tools that are available online in terms of a keyword research tool that you put some, you can put what you describe your business, and it shoots back at you a couple of keywords, and you can test it out like that, and it gives you guidelines about what you can put in the copy. So that is quite easy to get started like that. So you don't need to be fearful because you can control the cost, which is the main fear factor about that, and you can then slowly basically test it out like that.
Awesome, thank you. We've got another minute or so, so there's a couple more questions. Is there a rule of thumb for how many targeted people via Facebook, as an example, results in an actual sale?
No, not really. No, it's situational. It's not because at the end of the day, it's really what I would say to everyone. It's never about the quantity. It's always about the quality of the audience. So I would never go for a thing, let me just get, every single time, I would rather have a smaller, better defined audience than a larger audience. So if, for example, so don't go for things of, let me just try and get followers for the sake of getting followers so I can spread my name. I'd rather get the followers who are the right type of people, because at the end of the day, when you're trying to target them afterwards, you want to make sure that it is, if you've got a really big irrelevant audience, you're going to waste a lot more money. So generally what happens in terms of all that, there's certain minimums in terms of the only thing that you need to watch out for is that you need to reach a certain minimum. So for example, both Google and Facebook don't allow you, you need to, every time an audience has got to have minimum a couple of hundred people in order to because they don't allow you to target individuals. So you need to make sure that you got, as the smallest type of audience you can have is maybe of a couple of hundred people, maybe 500, sometimes it goes as low as 200, depending on how Google thinks that, or Facebook think that they can anonymize that data. But you need to look, whatever you're trying to create, that you need to have at least maybe, as a rule of thumb, maybe if you've got 500 people, that should be good enough for you to have effective targeting. But most of the time you're looking after it as 1,000 or a couple of thousand people in order to have a decent campaign.
Okay, there are more questions in the chat box, but I am mindful of time and I know people need to get back to, have you got a chance for one more question?
Sure.
One more?
I mean, for my
Sure. Last one, okay, and then I'll close it off. How does one use these principles to effectively market a service?
So the idea is basically that you analyze your service. So you are the one who I mentioned, you are the expert in your service. So for example, you analyze it, okay, so what is it? Is it a B2B? If it's a B2B that I'm targeting, then I may be the best, and I need to approach someone who's a work function, based on the work function, then maybe I need to figure out how to use LinkedIn, because I'm not going to get them according to what they like in terms of the interest in hiking and outdoor activity that they might indicate in Facebook. If it is something more about that you are selling more of a emotional based product, you're trying to get engagement, maybe you need to think about it. Is there some sort of stories on Facebook, or if it's a visual element, if there's a big visual element of it, maybe I would use Instagram. That's the thing. So it's dependent on what your business and what emotional appeal, or what is the target audience. You start basically identifying which is the most cost-effective channel. If it is something about, that you are very price competitive, you've got a product, and it's very straightforward, it's a product that everyone understands very well, but you've got a very good price in it, then maybe you go to things like shopping might be the most effective thing for you, because then you actually, you will shine over there. So it's really situationally dependent based on your product or service.
And then Ariel, if you position this title or conversation in light of the current pandemic,
Yeah.
I heard an interview the other day with the CEO of Takealot, and how, I mean, online should be the way to go and the way to shop and et cetera, et cetera. It's a no-brainer. Yet in his business, so many of his products, they're not allowed to sell.
Yeah.
So in light of that, you know, one also needs to manage expectations and see whether how one needs to adjust one's marketing strategy in terms of what's going on. So maybe you just want to end off with one or two comments, bringing it into what we're all going through at the moment.
Yeah, no. So in terms of what going through is like, obviously, look, we got the legal limitation of what you're allowed to do. And a lot of the thing, and it's been a bit of a frustration that a lot of other countries, for example, the e-commerce have been quite open. Okay, some countries not, so there have been restriction on essential services, but some not. So a lot of countries which haven't, they've seen a really massive increase in online because people naturally don't want to go to shopping malls, even if they're open, or so they tend to buy more online. So you got the environment now that you got a lot of product which you can't basically. So until that changes, so some people are going to follow the strategy that if it is a product that people are interested in, but they don't mind waiting, they say, okay, let's start marketing it, and basically we're allowed to market it, allowed to take orders, but then we might deliver later on. The risk with that strategy is that generally tends people look a little bit, a lot of time they want something now, so it might cloud your, it might reduce the conversion rate into the product, so you might not have a true sense of how people would react to it. So one of the things that you can do is if you do have elements in the meantime, so you can market it, and a lot of people have opted to, and then you can test to see if that works for you, that's great. Some businesses that we got actually, that it actually working for them quite well. They just tell people, you know what, you can buy it now, we're offering you specials to if you buy it now, and we'll deliver when we can, okay? And it actually worked for some. But again, you're offering all this time discounts, and there's a limit to how much you can do that. But at least if you haven't done that before, you can start testing the water, but with the idea that maybe that once it opens up, it might be different because of the immediacy of being able to fulfill. But maybe because it's limited at the moment, it might give you a chance as well, if you do cancel some products, to try and test. Let's concentrate on the product we're allowed to sell, or the services we're allowed to sell, and try and see, let's start with that. And when everyone else is locked down, everyone is in the same boat, that they cannot. So maybe it's a good time for me to brush up, make sure that I learn enough that I can actually be ready for when it opens up. So at least I'm not way behind in my understanding of how to use this medium. So effectively what we're doing is in this webinar, and all the webinars I offer, is basically a time to upskill ourselves to get ready for when the floodgates are open.
Awesome. Ariel, thank you. You covered a huge amount of content in such a short time, and you did it in great detail and clear understanding. So honestly, from ORT Jet, Brenna and myself, we're very grateful for your time and being open to share all this with our network. Thanks to everyone for joining us this morning. I will share the recording and Ariel's contact details. So if you do want to connect with him directly, he's very happy to receive any questions. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one, which is on Friday. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.